The image is down. The mics are open. Double check, refresh my other screen. There's probably going to be hella delay. Anyway, hello and welcome to the Geek on My Sleeve channel, where we do weekly book reviews, soon to be live, or where we do weekly book reviews, soon to be summary recaps, and live book discussions, coined as Geek Out, which you're seeing here now, where we do in-depth discussions of the book. So, spoiler warning ahead. If you have not read the book, bail now, come back. It will be archived for your viewing pleasure at a later date. And today we are doing Artemis Fowl, the first book, which is the author is Eoin Colfer, narrated by Nathaniel Parker. There is a movie tie-in edition. I'm curious to see how that goes. We will be doing a reactionary video here shortly to that. And I'm here with my co-host, Carl. How's everything going, Carl?
I'm doing all right. Um, Keep saying adjusting to the new norm, still in shelter in place. Um, Looking forward to talking about this childhood favorite of ours. Um, we kind of got into some of the details in the spoiler free. Um, but yeah. And also want to talk a little bit about the movie as well. A lot of controversy over it. But yeah, spoilers ahead. Where do you want to start, Pete?
Mm,
There's just so much.
so, first little note, this was probably one of the few books that I actually read a hard copy of. And with that being said, it was a while ago, and we just recently got the audiobook to, deal with this for now. And I'm honestly going to say there isn't a whole lot of difference between the two that I realized. Granted, that's with a bit of time in between. So I was kind of glad that there wasn't a whole lot of alteration on the book side. Looking at the oh pictures
The
on the screen the trailer for the video or the movie coming out, it seems like they had a lot of creative freedoms that are going to be interesting.
That was my first impression of the trailer as well. Um, it was not the Artemis I remembered, and I really want to go down the rabbit hole on that and talk about that some more. Uh, but yeah, I think the last time I read this book was over 15 years ago, and it was one of the first books I read a physical copy of. Uh, Thoroughly enjoyed it. I think I got up to like the third in the series, and now there's 8 in the series, I believe. In addition to some graphic novels and the soon-to-be movie. Uh, and there's just so much there that, as an early reader, as a kid, um, to enjoy. The quick synopsis is it's about this 12-year-old boy who is pretty much part of the Irish mafia, right? Um, when they pull up a file in the Ferry archives, it's supposedly like, I forget how big, but it was a huge file of just like crime lord stuff. And he decides that he's going to kidnap a fairy and hold them for ransom. And it's just this 12-year-old boy using his wits to outthink this whole fairy species, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good little synopsis of it. Let's see here. We start off kind of getting a backstory into Artemis Fowl II, and it talks about how they were billionaires, but due to Artemis Fowl I trying to capitalize on a new market, I forget
Mm-hmm.
where exactly it speaks of, he is now MIA, missing in action. He has been essentially other crime lords didn't like him encroaching on their territory, which, as far as the book's concerned, that's all we really see or hear about the father, is
Mm-hmm.
pretty much that he had a plan, it backfired. One of the butlers and Artemis I are MIA. Now, in regards to, I'm going to try not to bounce back and forth too much, but the movie trailer, it seemed it may have gone a couple books further, or that it added some substance to make it more of a connection. Because in this one, there's like a couple little parts that are like, okay, Artemis is human, his his mother who has some mental trauma or whatever state, references
Right.
the husband a couple times, but that's as far as the book is concerned.
Mm-hmm. The movie, it seemed like the father is a lot larger piece. It seemed like half the trailer had him, and I wish I had the character or the actor list pulled up because there's a lot of big names in the Disney film. Um, but yeah, I feel it does a really good job with the intro. Like you said, you get the backstory on the family. You get to see kind of Artemis's and Butler's character as they pretty much answer what is an internet ad. Um, and yeah,
Yeah, back in the days of Craigslist. I
hey,
guess it's
Craig's
it's still a thing, but
still a thing. The book is dated, and
Dad disappears with a shipment of cola to Russia. Thank you, Karen Hall, for chiming in there. Yes, in the beginning, that's where Artemis I disappears. Apparently, there's a new booming market out in Russia, and he's like, "Hey, let's capitalize on it." And I
mm,
think a Stinger missile or something, if I remember correctly, they go and they sink it. Um, of course, being a foul and Butler being as epic as he is, there's no way he's dead. Like, he's still alive.
yeah.
Plus, with it being a kid show, they probably just pull out the Pokemon trope. They fainted. They can't really die.
Oh, yeah. It's going to be interesting. Um, yeah, there's a lot in the movie trailer. Don't want to go down that rabbit hole just yet. Uh, but yeah, this it's a short story, and I remember going through every chapter felt action packed to me. That first chapter alone, they have the whole experience with again him using his wit to trick the fairy healer. Um, and then he gets the book that she keeps and translates it, right? So again, as an early reader, I remember it was a lot of fun to see this kid close to my age just solve the mystery or crack the code on the fairy language and translate this book.
Yeah, and for me, it meant a lot because at this time, I want to say, oh man, I forget which version of Pokemon it was, but I was playing Pokemon and they had the unknowns that were different shaped characters, and you had the
Mm,
unknown scroll or whatever on the wall. So I felt it connected a lot because in the Pokemon franchise, as you had to look up you kind of cheated where I looked up the translation code online and then I had to physically put it in and recreate the words. So it felt very realistic for the time, and that's something that the movie is going to have to adapt on. There's a scene after he gets the book where he's trying to translate it, and it's like, oh yeah, crammed it full of high tech high tech technology, a bunch of networked Apple Macs, and I'm just like, they're gonna have to spice that up, or with the picture moment where they're like, oh yeah, the
We
picture looks good, but any picture can be faked with a flatbed scanner, and it's like, what are you talking about? Like everybody, there are 12-year-olds who use Photoshop.
it's definitely a dated book in that sense. Um, Earlier, you touched on a good point. The actual physical book has the gnomish fairy language going across the bottom. And yeah, if you want to, you can figure it out. And there's people that have deciphered it and
Oh
posted it.
yeah, I forgot about
It's
that.
on Goodreads. Yeah. So teaching kids young to go through and decode in addition to reading. So we talked a bit about it in the spoiler free video. It There's a lot of things that as you read it as an adult, um, it you don't want to be too overly critical, but when you look through it through a young kid lens or an early childhood reader, there's a lot of pieces that it does really well with the book, and anything that will get kids to read. There's a reason why it's won so many literacy awards. Uh, and we keep saying young adult, but it's targeted, or at least one of the awards was grades like 6 to 8. Um,
Yeah, that's why the fairy technology was so cool, Karen said. And
mhm,
they did well with that. And I think a lot of that stuff will still hold up. I'm trying to remember the scene. So we had just kidnapped Holly, and we're
mhm,
going back, and there's the or not transport, the tracking thing, and he's talking about how the screws are put in with like electromagnets, and he has to use a domestic magnet to figure that out and do different
mhm.
stuff. And then they don't actually show us the scene, because then Butler, he's like, hey, go be a distraction. And we get the Chuck Norris vibe at the end anyway. So the technology, and then the fact that this 12-year-old tweaked the tracking thing and pretty much stole a huge ship and sent it off to do its own thing, and then got back and all this. But yeah, the fairy technology is very exciting.
It was a lot of fun, and I remember that being when I was a kid, that you just wanted to keep reading it, and to see this character, this 12-year-old, just problem solve his way through all these challenges as he plays with these crazy gadgets. Yeah, it'll
Yeah.
be interesting. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Or while I was responding to Anna Graff Williams' message, when you guys read this, I read it to audit the moral compass of the main character. And that's really where the book did well, because for that time frame, or for that age group, that's a very rebellious-esque age group, so it spoke to them on that level. But then if you continue throughout the stories, it's all about him changing his ways and bettering himself, and you see little parts of it, like when he captures Holly under the tree, he gets that little pang of, oh, it's a girl. I didn't think it would be a girl, much like his mother, and much like, the other butler. And you get those little twinges. And then he kind of resets back to, hey, this is just business. I've got to do what I'm supposed to do. So it starts
It
off in kind of a darker moral compass, but then that's the whole, or at least for the three that I've read, that's kind of the journey throughout them, is kind of fixing his moral compass, and you get to see several of those moments, and at least throughout the first one. Sorry, jumping ahead here. Towards the end, where Holly's going back and taking some of the gold, and he has that moment of weakness, so to speak, where he's like, "Hey, how much for one of your um, a wish, to buy a wish?" And he ends up
Yes.
helping, correct his mother's illness or ailment. So you get to see a little bit of that, you know, boy or real world or better moral compass throughout it.
So many points along that little rant. First is like reading it, um, now I can't help but think about the Wreck-It Ralph moment when they're all in that office and where they're bad guys, but they're not bad guys, right? Artemis Fowl is the villain of the story because it opens it up as a report from the fairies' point of view, right?
Yeah.
Yet you see across these characters so much growth and starting as quote like enemies in the beginning and progressing to this mutual understanding by the end of the book where yeah.
I guess that's true. Karen Hall says, I like the variety of fairy creatures. They don't always play by the rules either. And that's something I think the movie is going to be able to do a lot better due to CGI and technology advances, where we just got like a very brief description.
Hmm.
But that's something I want to see more about. And I kind of expressed it in the spoiler free where the world building didn't do amazing for me because it kind of talked about like Diggum, and it talked about our centaur guy, and it like
Totally.
briefly gave us a Holly introduction, but then the main plot took place on the Fowl Manor, so we didn't get to see a whole lot of it.
I think part of that again is the rage it's targeting. It's
Yeah,
a lot easier to show things in video format that you would otherwise have to explain. Like there's a reason why Brandon Sanderson's Way of Kings is so freaking long. Just the amount of detail you can simply show in a movie. Uh, but yeah, I it, don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole on the video part just yet.
yeah,
But yeah, yeah. There's a lot more they can do there with the different fairy creatures, the goblins, the dwarves, and it just kind of hints at it, right?
yeah. I'm excited for that aspect of the movie, though I am kind of concerned for how many books it encompasses because traditionally the book
I
is longer and
mm,
more detailed, and the movie has to chop out scenes to make room for everything, where this is kind of flipped in the sense that it's a young adult, it's not super detailed, and the
yeah.
movie is going to be longer than the book because the book
Well,
is,
audio length is about 6 hours, right? But yeah, a lot of that is through showing. It's a short book. Um, I the, watched the trailers, and again, we could go into more details about it, but I think they almost went a completely different direction with it. Just a little bit we get from the trailer. Um, his father seems to be involved with the fairies already, and in the story, we don't even touch on his father. Um, and yeah, there's just so much difference there. I think they're just playing in the universe almost because after re-listening to the book and watching the trailer, it almost makes more sense that this would be Artemis the Third in this movie. Like for me, that would almost make more sense if you're going to completely change the storyline because he's like, oh, your father's already involved with the fairies. And then based off the trailer, he kind of Butler introduces Artemis to it. Um, but
yeah,
yeah, if it was Artemis the second was the dad, and then his kid, that would make more sense to me. Why it looks like the fairy people have already kidnapped him. Um,
true. And anyway, creative freedoms on that. So far in the story, we've talked about we get a little bit of Artemis or the Fowl backstory. We end up getting the book from the sprite, and that's something that kind of irked me in the book, where he talks as if he already knows, and he's like, "Hey, so I've got I've poisoned you, A, which devious, and then B, he's got two shots, and those two shots, he's got one that will um, what is it, counteract the holy water, and then he's got another one that will purge all the rice wine from it, and which will
Yes.
give her back her powers. So that's something that in the fairy community, as we later learn, is not possible, cannot be done. Their book pretty much says if you interact with the mud people, you are avoiding all rights to what we are. And so the fact that he hints at being able to beat it before he even fully knows about it could be pretty interesting. And I wish we got to see the repercussions and that fairy after the fact, or that sprite after the fact. But
Mm-hmm.
that's besides the point. Anyway, so we get the book. We talked about decoding it and just the
Mm-hmm.
struggles and the presumption of top to bottom, left to right, or the other things he runs through, and the reading
Mm-hmm.
pattern of starting in the middle and a spiral
Yeah.
is kind of cool. Then we do our stakeouts, which I think could be very exciting. We get to see a little bit of the fairy realm, or whatever, the underground realm, and the scene that I just got a chuckle out of when Holly. So the troll, we get the notice of the troll. Holly was just getting chewed out by Beetroot or whatever. I can't think of his actual
Right.
name.
Yeah.
And the trolls escaped, and Holly's coming to the centaur yet again. I'm sorry, can't think of the guy's name.
Foley.
I'm sorry.
Foley.
Foley. We get to Centaur
Yeah.
Foley, and he's like, "Okay, who saw you?" And she just starts listing off everything, and then the last one's like,
EIB.
EIB, and he's like, "What's EIB?" Everyone in the building, and so I gotta check out of that, and also the out of date tinfoil hat reference. Um,
There are a lot of really good puns that I enjoyed now and as a kid.
yeah,
And I think the author was really clever how he did it, where there's not a whole lot of world building with this book, but it explains a lot of stuff through more not really pop culture references, but there's like Cupid and the traditional mythical leprechaun, and that's how it explains like Lep Recon unit, and talks a little bit about the different types of fairies and sprites. Um,
yeah. That's something I really enjoyed. How it took kind of like traditional fairy tales and bumped them up a level as far as relatability and adult or young adult esque.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Um, Couple comments and questions about the movie. Uh, Karen asked if they stick to one book or combine a couple like they do in other epics. And Anna said trailer looks like they hybridize multiple books. And yeah, all-star cast. I'm not great with actors' names, but if I recognize faces, um, yeah. And that's what I was trying to figure out, if they do the multiple books or just take creative freedoms and completely branch off, or a hybrid of the two. Um, yeah.
Yeah, that would be Disney. It's mine. I'm going to do whatever I want with it.
Yeah, we won't start talking about Star Wars. And yeah. It
Okay.
So, note on the movie, something that I thought was interesting in the current times is it's been pushed back once again. This was originally supposed to come out um, last year. I want to say early last year, and it's finally coming out, and it's going directly to Disney Plus. A lot to do with the shelter in place. Um, but I want to say it's early June. And yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um,
Hmm. I don't know why that message got restricted.
it's
Uh,
okay. Uh, so
anyway, where were we in the story? We've got Holly, we've removed the tracker, and
mhm.
then beat the LEP commander comes out and he deals with it himself. And it talks about the him reactivating himself, which is almost unheard of for them moving that quick on something like that. But if you know the right
there,
people,
there was the sarcasm there, right? Because he was stamping his own approval papers to go
yeah.
back into the field. It was a clever way to show how serious it is, right? Um, a war between the races, the mud people and the people. Um,
Okay, just watch the trailer. Where is the book in the expert from characters excerpt?
oh,
Where
yeah,
is
except for characters. Yeah, that was my impression too, Karen. It looked like they did a lot different. The characters are there. Um, but the impression I got from Artemis in the movie was, or the trailer was, Butler was saying, "Hey, your dad's involved in the fairy world. Here's all his cool tech toys," and kind of like mentoring him through it. Where in the first chapter of the book, they even talk about like how complex their relationship is. Like the Butlers are um, together with a fowl from birth. They go through this rigorous training. There's a whole bunch of family loyalty there. Yet Artemis was, quote, the master, and he instructed this adult who was this high level bodyguard. And it was all Artemis outthinking them and navigating the confrontation with the fairy people.
well, just all the way around. And
Yeah.
I guess that's one thing that I thought there were more of, and it might be in further books where that first moment where we get to he's sitting down having tea and he's about to find the sprite and he's pretty much like, oh, you're not a waiter, you're our informant, and just like dresses him down and then talks
Mm-hmm.
about all the epic arsenal Butler
Mm-hmm.
has. And I thought there was more scenes of that, but it could have been in further books. But yeah.
Yeah. It's it's going to be interesting. Don't have a Disney Plus account. Definitely wanted a movie as a kid, but it's not the Artemis I remember. The book, listening to it, like you said earlier, we picked it up on Audible and it talked about a movie tie-in. So at first I was wondering if they were going to change the book. But when I listened to it again on Audible, it was very much how I remembered, where the trailer definitely wasn't. Um, so yeah, he decodes the book. They do the stakeout for about 4 months with Butler, and they manage to capture her, right?
Yep. Capture Holly Short.
They get the video feed, like you said, Root stamps his own papers going back into the field, and Artemis is he's always a step ahead of them, right? He learns the rules that they're supposed to follow from the book, confirms that they have a ransom fund that he can exploit, and it's pretty much like an operations manual about how they handles these situations, right? So he stays a step ahead of them. Um, well, I don't want to get too far ahead with Root, but even just when they send out what is it called, the team to recover her, um anyway, with the older brother Trouble and younger brother, what was his name, Grubbs or something like that.
I don't remember. But yeah, the
And
first wave, the Oh, it was some name that pretty much described what it was. They're pawns, but not pawns. They're
Peons.
yeah, I can't remember the name. Anyway, so they end up or okay, we already talked about it where Beat comes up and they blow up the whaler ship.
Yes, yes. We didn't talk too much about it, but yeah, he Artemis Fowl quickly goes through the fairy tech gear, right, and finds the tracker beacon, and they basically set up a trap for Root. Um, then yeah, they do the retrieval of all the data where they figure out that this Fowl family name has been around for a while, doing everything from corporate crime to all this other stuff back in the day. And then yeah, the next step was the retrieval team,
Yep,
right?
yep. The
And
first retrieval team and how Artemis is able to kind of figure out what the oh sorry, I just watched a bunch of green screen Harry Potter invisibility cloak things, and I'm having a brain fart.
oh, is it like with their shields?
Yeah, yeah,
You're talking
they're
about how the
shielding.
fairies shake so quickly that it's like a shimmer, right? To
Yeah,
where they
and
can't see it.
how
And
Artemis figures it out with the high speed camera, and
mhm,
then how he essentially guts a bunch of the equipment that they get from the first fairy wave, and he's able to
yes.
create stuff for Butler.
This story does it well with, again, thinking back to the first time I read it, what did we like? We liked the action scenes, and you get enough of those with Butler when he has to be the decoy and just, um, for that first trap that they set, and then when he attacks the people coming onto the lawn and plays the intimidation factor of sniping them out. Um, but yeah, he's such a good character too because you know always worrying for he's torn between taking care of his younger sister and Artemis, his loyalty to Artemis, right? And then his honor code with Holly later on. Like at first glance, he seems like just this hired thug, yet we get more layers to his character um, throughout the book.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
but Butler's awesome.
yeah,
Um, Sorry, trying to continue with where we were at. So now we've got Holly, and we think she's done for, but she ends up somehow dropping the acorn into her boot. And even though they completely strip her of all of her tech, she still has that. So then she's, bashing the floorboards of this recently constructed jail cell type thing, trying to do something. Then we have Root go back and we get to see Diggum or Mulch Diggum, and that's another cool scene where we get to see the dwarf versus goblin and kind of
yeah.
the ganging up flame thing and the whole fire scene there where he's like, you know, inhales the fireball and is passing it around and inhales more air for it. And then when, it's about to happen, he sticks his thumbs up his nose and it backfires on him. And, they're fireproof, but not from the inside in that capacity. And then, the LEP officers jump in and cancel it all out. And then we get to
It
see Diggum and all that. So, yeah, yeah,
That scene helps set up a bit of the fairy lore, which is also nice. Like we had that scene of Mulch early on in the story,
yeah,
and if this book shows you something, pay attention. And sure enough, the dwarf comes back later, and you get more of that kind of lore through the conversation with the goblins, with the struggle between the dwarfs and the goblin race, and just a bit of their magical properties and why mulch is so unique, right? Again, these fairies have the rules that they follow, where if they want to retain their magic, they cannot enter a building without an invitation, right?
Yeah.
Like there's something sacred about that if they want to keep their powers. So Mulch, who's a burglar, first time we see him, he's stealing from his own officer, and
He's
yeah, so
accepted the
he doesn't
lot.
have magic. Hmm?
He's accepted the lot of not needing or not having magic. And then we get more
Right.
into kind of like the, oh, I don't want to say leprechaun, but what Holly is, because the leprechaun is the
She's an
task
elf.
force, or yeah, so she's an elf,
Mm-hmm.
and Diggum is a dwarf, and then we meet a
Mm-hmm.
troll, and then we meet a centaur. But
Mm-hmm.
due to him being a dwarf, like he, and even as an elf, like they don't have that much magical power, and that's where a lot of it
Mm-hmm.
comes down to tech, because they have the shimmer, the cloaking, they have the mesmer, and then they have healing, which, I mean, being able to go poof and heal yourself saves us in the end. But
It certainly was convenient for us, yeah, with Butler.
yeah, so anyway, we get Diggum, and he comes up into the wine cellar. Um, and of course, by this point, Holly's broken out. Uh,
Karen, real quick, Karen made a comment about the cool thing about Mulch is the explosive farts. That
yeah,
was a
yeah,
fun laugh out loud scene, where just the timing of it all knocking Butler out of commission, who has pretty much been indestructible at this point, right?
yeah.
Yeah. So there are a lot of those laugh out loud moments in this book. A lot of action scenes sprinkled through. The characters are great. Uh, yeah, yeah.
And just also kind of the fairies and their mentality towards everything. Like when we get to see the troll and Holly, address the troll at first, like she's not allowed to kill the troll. Like this thing is, rampaging and destroying and killing people, but due to their moral compass and being, as Anna said, the fairy James Bond, they're not allowed to kill him. I don't think they end up getting the girl in the end, and or the guy, because our main fairy is a girl, but they have the counterpoint moral compass, and we see them not kill the troll, not kill
Mm,
any of the people. They just do
mm-hmm.
their memory wipe, all Men in Black style, and
Right.
then we get to see, due to their parameters or their lore, she can't just leave. She's escaped. She's gotten her powers back. She put a mesmer on
Juliet.
on Juliet.
WrestleMania.
Yeah, yeah, saying there's WrestleMania, and so we get to actually see the mesmer in effect.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then just the fact that, so back to where we are. Sorry, bouncing around here.
You're good.
Mulch Diggum gets in, meets up with Holly. They have their, oh, hey, what's going on here? Oh, cool. Yeah. And then Mulch ends up finding the secret hidden chest, and we get the
Mm,
explosive fart factor for taking
yeah.
out Butler, who, has been amazing this whole time. And then trying to think what happens next. He finds the safe for the money. He finds the book. So now they know that Artemis has a copy of the book.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think the
He
next scene
stages his death.
is, or so I guess we completely glossed over it. The fairies have implemented their time stop, and the
Yes.
fact of I really enjoy the lore and how it all changes. And we talked about a little bit of, Holly is a descendant from Cupid, and the fact that Santa Claus was actually a fairy, and it was, a bunch of warlocks doing this special thing, but then the centaur
Right.
with this tinfoil hat finds a way to weaponize or turn it into electrical components, and you don't have batteries trying to show off to each other, and just the whole like human or natural aspect of if they have to go to the bathroom, they've got to break the time stop. If they are trying to show off, it messes with the the field and the fluctuation. Setting all the parameters for the bio bomb and just like all this interesting tech. Anyway, so we've implemented the time stop, and Artemis, yet again, is just one step ahead, where due to his mother and the condition, he has the idea because of the Santa Claus lore and how people figure out about Santa Claus, and when the time stop goes into effect, they're still awake and you can't fall asleep or you can't stay awake during it. He figures out due to forced or induced sleep, you can bypass it. So the
Mm-hmm.
mom ends up disappearing from the time stop bubble. And
Yes.
that's how, and we get the foreshadowing's pretty good for young adult, where Artemis is figuring it out. And we know that Butler doesn't know about it. And we get to see a lot of the raw emotions there, where for, Holly's escaped, the troll's on the way, Diggum's in the house. They figure out the time loop, and then Holly is about to punch Artemis, and he's so sure of everything. He's like, "Oh, Butler's got this. I don't have to worry about Jack." And then, in the corner of his eye, he sees the Butler going down towards Holly's old thing, where names escape me.
Check on his sister Juliet,
Check on his
right?
sister Juliet, and he actually gets
Never had to
hit,
worry
and it's
about.
just that whole reality shock of you hit me, and we get to see a little more of the human side instead of the you know evil empire-esque theme we got
It,
going on.
it did a good job reminding us throughout the book that as clever as he was, and they talk about it like first couple lines in the book that he drives other psych people crazy by trying to figure out how smart he is. He's still a 12-year-old boy. He's still concerned about, you know, his mother's well-being, makes some silly mistakes. Um, yeah,
Yeah, but then
yeah.
he often, resets and kind of finds the good in the situation. Like Holly got out, they found the book. They've got, someone who doesn't have to abide by the rules, Diggum.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, so let me analyze this and see where we're at. Well, since I gave the command, you cannot leave this house, so he's still in control of the situation.
Yeah. He doesn't
Oh,
like lollipops, is
man,
what
that's okay. That right after that was another good scene where Holly just hit him in the face, and she makes a comment about lollipops, and Artemis is just like so shocked that Butler didn't save his bacon or whatever,
hmm
and now he's having, this battle of wits with Holly, and it's something about lollipops. And then same thing, like as soon as he interacts with Butler, he's like lollipops because he's still so hung up on it, but he's still trying to move
Yes.
forward. And so
Yes.
yeah, another part of the human aspect. Okay, so then we've got the troll. I believe is our next big scene. Um,
The one we met in chapter 2 comes back as we're later told a deputy for the Leprechaun unit. Um, but yeah, again, the foreshadowing, I think Foley warns him about his best friend, I want to say Calder or something like that, going from memory, that one day he'll stab him in the back and he pretty much takes over the operation and sends in the troll. Um, and they're always just falling back on no one's been able to escape the time field and the biobomb, right? Because that's pretty much the fairies are going through these set of rules that they've bound themselves to with this crazy technology. Done the negotiation, done everything, and they're not going to give them the gold initially. So then in comes the troll, and yeah, the action scene there, just with Butler and Holly, and then again Butler. Um,
Yeah, and you get to see the humanity of Butler, where he's just picked up his daughter. He knows that she's not
Sister.
sound of mind. He doesn't know why, because,
Hmm.
Fowl hasn't explained the mesmer or the reflective glasses bit. But so you get to see the initial reaction where he's like, okay, they explode the front door and there's about to be a bunch of cover fire. I would have already been across the way, returning fire, doing all this epic stuff. But then you get to see the humanity of, like with his little sister over his shoulder,
Hmm.
he can't subjugate her to that while she's not sound of mind. And then you get the whole troll situation. And
Hmm.
due to, I don't know exactly if it's intentional, because I think Holly's trying to utilize her headset or her whatever. And since Artemis has gutted it, it doesn't operate as intended. So she gets clobbered and her hand
Mm.
ends up touching Butler, who recently, is not doing so well. And Holly heals or saves Butler, and which comes out later after, Butler goes and destroys the troll. Essentially Second Life, but anyway, destroys the troll.
Yes.
And then, due to Holly's nature of not being able to kill the troll and it just being, they don't kill things, they incapacitate and memory wipe and do other things to
Hmm.
get by. And so, yeah, the
Yeah,
whole
life
like
is
you owe me.
sacred, and they hold themselves to those rules. And it speaks to like one of the things this series seems to do so well is just the depth of these characters, right? Like Butler isn't just somebody that blindly follows Artemis's orders. Like he trusts him, he's loyal, but he's still concerned for his sister. He's still, um, occasionally
Honor of the
calls out
enemy,
Artemis. Go ahead.
the honor of the enemy kind of scene with Holly.
Yeah,
You owe me. I could have killed your sister. I could have done whatever, but due to just inflicting her with the mesmer and keeping her alive and safe, you owe me. You're not going to kill this
yeah.
troll. So,
And in regards to Artemis, Anna and Karen make good points about talking about the emotional IQ and intelligence not always being the same. Kind of seeing that aspect with Artemis, like he's still just a kid, um, which is where Karen brings up the author periodically throwing Artemis off his game with scenes involving his mother, who is currently crazy. Um, you see that early on with her talking about like shadows or things in the shadows, but needing the blinds closed, and just how he kind of has to work through the emotions of that interaction. And then when she makes the doll in her husband's and Artemis father's clothes, right? Here he is getting ready for this standoff with the fairies and everything. I think it's before the recovery team gets there. Um, but yeah, so yeah, fantasy mafia enforcers with a code of honor. Um,
so after we've destroyed the troll, sent it back, then we have the whole beetroot guy finagling with our centaur buddy at Mr. Tinfoil. Sorry for
Foley,
names, Foley's, and
the only
they
centaur though.
they manipulate the backstabbing, grew up in the same tunnel person. Oh God, I'm so bad with
Colder,
names.
it's
And
okay.
so I guess something we glossed
The
over.
tapes went missing, right?
It,
The
Hold on. Root goes
Okay.
in and has the conversation with Artemis, and Artemis sets down the groundwork of, as long as I'm alive, none of you can come into my house. And
Hmm.
Artemis is hoping that they find it and that they're trying to exploit it by utilizing the biobomb, of which we think, or he knows, he can escape due to the mother. long story short, then due to Foley, the centaur, and Root being, finally catching his wits or his second wind of, hey, this guy is just going to stab me in the back. Hey, he's just looking out for himself. And you get to see the different management styles, so to speak, where Root reactivated himself, is on the front lines, is right there for his people. The other guy's like, oh, I'm too important to risk, so I'm not going to jump into this. I'm not going to be front line. I'm just going to sit here in my cushy desk job and utilize the bio bomb and be done with it. But Root's behind the scenes setting up the gold transfer anyway, because he then does the switcheroo or whatever, and the finger scene where the high tech but low tech situation, and that's something the author does well. Sorry, I'm all over the place here.
You are all over the place here.
Author talks about all the high tech stuff in the beginning. Artemis gets the tech. He uses it to do several cool things with Butler and seeing the fairies and blah 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 blah. Then, due to Artemis collecting the tech, they have Root go in pretty much with just an iris cam and a fancy finger, of which people have been known to forget they have, and they've managed to, pick their nose and mess up
Put themselves out.
Yeah. And then the whole, he's able to use that as an excuse or as a bypass when he takes out his old buddy who grew up in the same tunnels, and he's pointing his finger at him and he accidentally shoots it. And of course, the centaur the whole time is like, oh, yeah, oh, you still have it on. And then he plays it off like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. I completely forgot, which lines up with everybody else. Anyway.
Plausible deniability.
Back to where I was. We get the gold. Gold goes in. We get the irony of troubleshooting technology, of which I can totally understand, where the auto plates or whatever mover plates run into the step and they're supposed to just be able to get there. And it's, he's having to do all these extra troubleshoot things to get it up to where it needs to be. Yeah. So that was funny. I enjoyed that.
It brought this level of humanity to them, right?
Yeah.
They're very much they're fighting each other, enemies, worried about going to war, yet those little real life moments, seeing those fairies from that perspective, we already talked about it, just the whole overarching theme of these two species being at ends and eventually coming to a mutual understanding, right? Where everyone walks away ahead, I guess.
Yeah.
Especially Mulch, but I guess I'm getting ahead of myself there.
I guess we glossed over that because that was after the troll incident where he's like, oh yeah, I better get out of here. Okay, Holly, looks like you got this. And so, yet again, good job for the foreshadowing, for the space. Diggum is going through, getting to the Fowl Manor, and he notices some bunnies. Okay, at the time, what about bunnies? And he makes a comment about needing to know where the local wildlife is. We get to see the iris cam stuff. We get the laugh of the tunnel collapsing, and he's being like, oh no, I'm dying. And we get to see Root be like, what's going on? And just the chuckle from Diggum being like, hey, he's got to keep with his code or with everything else. And it's obvious what's going on. He's being buried alive right now. And he's able to switch the iris cam over to the bunny, of which reads the health stats or reads the biometrics, and they figure out, the centaur notices that his heart rate is beating faster than it should. And in knowing that, it seems odd to him, but with everything else going on, he's got to kind of reset and go back to, the matter at hand. And that's just kind of like a side note thing. So anyway, Diggum escapes, which is no surprise because he's done it several times in the past. But I don't know, it's unique the way the foreshadowing comes out with the bunnies, the way the technology is able to read the heart rate and everything else. Back to where we're at. So they're sending in the gold. Butler ends up checking out the transport, pulls off I believe it's a camera, pulls off a camera out of the unit, which, is a good thing, so to speak. And then we're towards the end here, we get to see the humanity of Artemis, and we get to see that twinge of, they talk about he's of the best age where he doesn't believe in, the pot of gold at the end of a rainbow with a leprechaun, but he does believe in the magic because he's seen it firsthand now. So after getting the gold, he turns to Holly and he's like, how much to buy a wish? And, we don't learn about it until after the fact, but he essentially, wishes to heal his mother. And honestly, it's been a minute. I don't remember how well that works out. In the book, we get to see a little bit of it where she's more coherent. But at the same time, like, I don't know if it is Christmas. I don't know if that's like Artemis doesn't care about Christmas. He doesn't have anyone to reference it with. He doesn't have anyone to talk about it with. It's, no one else really going on in his life, presents, whatever, blah, 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 doesn't care. So it is actually Christmas, and the mother's more coherent than I thought. Or if it has to do when the original Fowl went missing, when she's essentially lost the time of which she wasn't coherent. So I don't know if she needs to be refreshed and brought up to the time sense of where they're at, or if it is actually Christmas. So that's side note. Anyway, Artemis's humanity. Holly, gets her moment of truth, moment to shine, where she gets some of the gold back. And she also has kind of that moment where, kind of with Butler, where she's like, hey, you owe me a favor, don't kill the troll. And then she gets back to Root and she's like, hey, there's innocence in there. She's interacted with, Suplex Lady, Butler's daughter, Juliet.
Sister. Younger
yes.
sister, Juliet.
And she's like, there's innocence in there. We can't biobomb it. And, she's trying to play both sides, so to speak, or the humanity factor. And Root's like, I can't do it, with everything else going on, with battling with, Mr. grew up in the same tunnel. And he has to do it. And Artemis feels like he can get through it. And, lo and behold, he does. He figures out, due to the mother, that when the time stop is initiated, you are perpetually stuck in that state of existence, being awake or being asleep. But if it's chemically induced, it's out of your hands, And that's where we get to see, Butler kind of battle with himself. The biobomb is about to go off, and Artemis purposefully doesn't tell Butler because he knows with all his training and whatnot. And, Butler realizes it because he has that moment of truth after drinking the sleeping pill where he's like, oh, I totally could have, snapped Artemis's neck right then and there, but he doesn't because of the trust. But then he's battling with his, emotions and training. And after they get out of it, the sister, so to speak, is drunk on the floor. And, Artemis explains it. And Butler, even though he cares, he says it very simplistically, but, it's very heartfelt, where he says, hey, don't ever do that again. We're not going to mess with fairies. They're a little too human. And so he agrees with them, but as we know, it doesn't last. We do more of it. That's the whole purpose of this book, is to play in that space.
Yes.
But yeah, we get to see the humanity there.
So much there. You touched on a lot of good points, and the characters are just so well done. Like the depth to Butler And yeah, there's several times where he's not just this robot manservant that's a yes man. He questions him. He may not always vocalize it, but you get to see that like where he almost does. Um, and yeah.
Yeah, so then we get to see why Holly went back with half the gold due
Hmm.
to Artemis wanting to save the mother. We get to see Artemis escape the time stop and the biobomb,
Hmm.
which no one else has done before. We get to see, and one of the things that kind of irks me, um, so if you violate the agreements, you're supposed to lose all your powers, was my understanding. But when the Leps come back into the manor after they think that Artemis has perished due to the biobomb, they end up vomiting and throwing up, except for Holly because she does have prior acceptance into it.
Hmm.
And that, that's just a great out for everything else going on.
Well, that
But
that scene
they
too.
puke. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just about to say, like with Foley's kind of like the counter to Artemis with just like how smart he is. But with all of them, they just go marching in because it never crossed their mind that he would actually escape, right? They were so confident. Foley even said, like, if there was a way, I would have figured it out, right? So he has to look it up, the symptoms, and then be like, oh, the symptoms you guys are all experiencing is you didn't get permission to enter. So they're just vomiting and throwing up, and yeah, it's really well done. Couple comments. Karen said the author does a really good job setting up the characters for the next book, like Dugham's escape, and I couldn't agree with that more. It wraps up these different story arcs here, but it sets them up for so much more. And in the report, it even says that there are multiple incidents, right? Because this whole thing is bundled up as like a fairy report when they're summarizing it at the end, with Holly being an expert on the future Artemis cases, um, and just like the other details there. Uh, Yeah, yeah. Anna talks about the mom checked out with the father not being there, and Artemis keeps trying to heal his mom, which is where he was willing to give up half that gold, right? Up until this point in the story, it was all about the gold. They were taking all these risks to restore his fortune, and the mother's health started deteriorating after the father left, and he did that wish. Um, yeah.
Yep, yep.
All in all, as an adult coming back reading the book, I know we did the spoiler free review, but what's your overall take on the book?
So I still really enjoy it. There are a
Hmm.
couple technological moments where I'm like, okay, they definitely need to update that. Like the whole fairy
Yeah.
bit where they're like, oh, anything can be faked with the flatbed scanner. It's like, no, anything can be faked with Photoshop or GIMP. Like they're gonna have to update that, and I'm
Hmm.
sure they do. And even though he gave up all that money or gold at the end, like he still has all the LEP recon stuff, all the technology from that. He talks about as soon as
Hmm.
he captures Holly that, oh well, we could sit pretty off of just the tech now. Yeah, he ends up
Right.
throwing away the locator or whatever, but he still has all the tech.
It looks like the movie is going to be pretty tech heavy.
Yeah,
Going from memory, I think Butler basically pulls out part of a wall and it's just full of all these sci-fi gizmos and gadgets. So that
and
should be interesting.
yeah,
And that was another thing that just seems so different with the book and the movie is all throughout this, Artemis doesn't pick up a weapon. He is very much the master of the manor, stepping in while his father's away at age 12, and he doesn't pick up a gun. He doesn't, handle anything. Butler does that all for him. And the movie, it looks kind of like a kid's spy movie where I think there was a scene where he's holding a big old blaster or something, right?
Yeah, yeah, and that's
Um,
yet again creative freedoms, and we'll be doing a reactionary video that we can go more into detail.
yeah, okay, okay.
Or I'm
Um,
torn because I'm
no,
tempted to throw it up and do part of it now, but at the same time,
you're right.
it's a separate thing. Um, and I feel I would like to continue the storyline of this book. It was done very well. Um, we talked about the moral compass bit, the fairy tale bits, and more of books and lore that I'm getting into. Uh, they're based off of reality, or they're based off of prior stories. For example, Brandon Sanderson talks about how he created, oh, what is it, the Emperor's Soul book, and how he created the whole magic system behind it because an Asian culture takes art and carves their name across it. And so he
Right.
created that. And then we've recently done some of the Witcher stuff, which is a direct, granted, it's not so much American fairy tales, but a lot of the mythical creatures in
Polish.
it are from a
Hmm.
different culture's perspective. And that, for this, we talk about the Leps and the elves and the dwarves and a lot of, like, I guess in my experience, a D&D esque
Hmm.
characters, and we explore
Hmm.
them. So apparently, it's Mother Goose is out and fairy tales are in.
There you go. There you go. There's a lot of similar lore across, and we could go down the rabbit hole talking about just how the different genres have evolved over the years and how so much more people understand the space, right? When you say elf, people know what an elf is.
Yeah.
When you say dwarf, people know what a dwarf is. At least in the books that we read. But I agree with you. It's a good book. It's definitely a early young adult book. So it's missing some elements there that I really appreciate. But there's so many great takeaways from the book and so many good lessons and feels, and really enjoyed following the character development through book one. And I vaguely, it's been 15 years plus since I read the second and the third, but it's a fun series.
Yep. Yep.
So
Don't know. Or I guess, are we at wrapping up?
yeah, final thoughts.
Or so, yeah, final thoughts. Enjoyed the first one. We'll be continuing the series. I didn't even know there was 8 out. Like we said before, we had only ventured into the third one, of which I do remember enjoying. Don't know when exactly we're going to play with those in this space. As far as Sunday, 8 p.m. Eastern
When?
is concerned, the next one on the list is Thunderhead, which is the second book in Arc of Scythes. It is also a young adult by Neil Schusterman,
I believe it's
um,
Schusterman,
Schusterman, and
and
so
it's an
that is going to
older
be
young
next
adult book.
Sunday. We do have some content we will be creating to spoiler free and summarize prior books and that book coming up. And it is a, I guess, brief synopsis, kind of a utopian society where the cloud has evolved into a overarching AI that controls and watches everything. We have succeeded death. Death is no longer a factor. So we have created a death army, death police force that is in charge of controlling the population. It's yet again still young adult, still a lot of the emotional, moral compass feels Sunday.
Next Sunday, and we also have a video up that covers all the Geek Out streams for the month of May. So go check that out, May TBR. And yeah, appreciate everybody showing up. Your feedback is always appreciated. And yeah,
Yep. Thank you. Thank you.
thank you.
Bye.
Bye.